This meeting between President Trump and Putin is also not the first U.S.-Russian meeting to take place in Finland. Now, for more historical context on the meeting, let's bring in presidential historian and friend of the show, Doug Wead. Doug, thank you so much for joining us. I wish you were in studio. We love having you on, sir.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay, so the president says he has low expectations ahead of this meeting. Is that for situational meeting this situation, or because we've seen this meeting take place before with prior administrations?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think this summit's going to be about money. He went to NATO and said, you got to spend more. And I think he's going to go to Helsinki and he's going to say, you got to spend less. It's with Donald Trump, it's monomania. It's make America great again. Jobs, jobs, jobs. And he told us in advance, he telegraphed, it's going to be a lot easier with Putin than with NATO, because it's a lot easier to talk people into spending less money than it is talking them into spending more. So I expect him to say to Putin, hey, we'll stop gaming Baltic states if you stop gaming Baltic states. Let's work together on terrorism. That's what brought Putin to power, terrorism, his dealing with terrorism. And if he can talk Putin into working with us on a few of these issues, it will save money that he can use for his infrastructure program, Trump, back at home.
Well, and when you talk about President Trump putting America first, I mean, that's why he was elected, to make this global affront that he's been doing. So I'm asking you, probably from a historical perspective, how are things different, especially over the past 48 hours when we see these 12 indictments come down? How is the U.S. approaching Russia now, and how is it different from past administrations?
Well, all of these summits and treaties are very, very different, but there are three slender threads woven through all of them in history, all the way back to antiquities, and those are, all of these treaties are about power, money, and land. Camp David about land, about money, Yalta about land, about power. And this one, too. I mean, we could talk about the Ukraine. There's one thing you'll never hear on TV. I'm going to say it, Elizabeth, and that's Khrushchev was the premier of the Soviet Union when he was from Ukraine. On his wife's birthday, he gave a big chunk of Russia to Ukraine, and it didn't matter at all because they were both countries in the USSR. But when Yeltsin dissolved the USSR, now a big chunk of Russian-speaking, Russian Orthodox Christians were now part of the Ukraine. And it's caused a big problem, and we see it differently than the Russians see it.
Do you expect or anticipate anything really to come out of this? You know, there has been criticism. I've been watching some of the political talk shows, and some critics are saying, listen, why are we even having this summit? What does the U.S. want? Do they want, you know, Russia to get out of Syria, and they want to influence Iran? So there's certainly a lot of things, but there are critics who are saying it's unnecessary. Is that true?
No, there's tremendous duplication of expense. Stop and think, if you were Russian, would you want a new country with nuclear power on your border? They have an interest to work with us on North Korea and on Iran. It can save us a lot of money if we pool our resources on terrorism, for example. It could save a lot of money in terms of raising money for NATO if they would just spend less on their defense. So there's a lot of mutual interest. I think that's why Trump said NATO, the meeting's going to be tough. The one in Russia will be easy, because it's easier. It's a win-win for America and Putin. And as far as the Democrat, this idea of not having the summit, it is absolutely ridiculous. If Reagan can sit down with Gorbachev, who was still running concentration camps, Perm 36, for example, then surely we can sit down with Putin, all his problems notwithstanding. They have a 16% income tax rate. They have, some say, more religious freedom in Russia than we have in the United States. So certainly these two can sit down and can deal with some of these issues.
All right, Doug Wead, thank you so much for joining us, sir. We anticipate the meeting tomorrow with a lot of news to come out of it. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
And of course, stay tuned.